I think one thing is that we've always assumed that information, that the science, persuades people. And certainly scientists believe that. And therefore, surely once we had the overwhelming evidence, the evidence builds and it builds and it builds, it gets stronger and stronger, then we've got enough to push everybody over. And maybe all of those people who don't accept it, well, once they've got that overwhelming weight, they tip over. And it's clear that actually, yes, we do form our opinions and judgments on the basis of science, but also that the process is more complex than that. I think we can say as well as the science of climate change, as it were, the kind of the atmospheric physics of climate change, we also need to draw on the science of cognitive psychology, or the science of sociology and social anthropology. We need to recognize that actually the way that people form their views is very, as I said, very complex. Certainly from the point of view of cognitive psychology, we know that there are different processes in the brain for processing information, that there are parallel processes, that there's one which deals with information, with data, this kind of like rational side, but there is another parallel process, what psychologists call affective reasoning, which dominates our decision-making, and that is driven by cues, signals, and bias, above all by bias. I lived in New York at one time, and I used to cycle around New York, and on the avenues in New York, there's a point where you wait for the green lights to line up as they trigger in sequence. And if you pedal like crazy, you could shoot the whole way down Broadway. There's a little bit of a hill up the top end. You go shoot straight down. And it's like that. You need those green lights to all be lined up. Because the question is not like, why do we ignore climate change? Clearly, some people do not ignore it. I'd imagine most of you here in the audience are very concerned about and active on it. So it's not like it's inherently impossible for us to understand. But I would suggest for us, those lights line up. It speaks to us, it speaks to our values, we understand it, but people around us are telling us about it, and that happens. But for the majority of people, it doesn't work right. I should say, one of the people I interviewed for the book was Professor Kahneman. I don't know if any of you have read Daniel Kahneman, his book, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. It was a brilliant book. I think anybody working in attitude change and communications must read this book. Kahneman he got a Nobel Prize for his work on the biases of decision-making. And I asked him about climate change. I said, Professor Kahneman, you've worked on this. You are the leader in this field. And he just says, this is the impossible problem. He was very nice about it. He's a lovely man. He kind of like took me by the hand and he said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. He said,
You're not firing us up with hope here, George.
No, well, but I want to, okay, but let me continue on the line and then shut me out. Because he said it had, in his view, a perfect combination of biases, right? That it was in the future. It was in the future, and he said we're very biased against the future. We're very short-sighted, but it involves costs. He says we're cost-averse. He says we hate costs, but he said that there's uncertainties there, and we tend to have a bias against uncertainty. We discount uncertainty.
Those who are concerned about climate change this country, as you've been talking about, are broadly those with progressive values, not those with conservative values.
Yes.
But you are also proposing that we have to reach across to people who do have conservative values.
No, we need to recognize strategically that it is absolutely essential that we have some form of broad-based diversity within the action on climate change. We have to see the measure of our success in terms of dealing with climate change being that if we go out there and we ask people, are you concerned about climate change, that there is no polarization between left and right. Because I do not see how otherwise we're going to move on this. And I think that is critically important. I do not believe that this is an issue where we can have some kind of vanguardist approach where a minority of very, very empowered and energized people on the left can somehow force this through. This issue is far too big for that. And that means that then when we think of what are the ways that we do that, we have to be finding narratives which are about collective identity as well.
I was very struck looking at the website of the UNFCCC, the official UN body which does the climate negotiations, where this website stretches across 20 years. And And it goes on and on about what we've got to do about greenhouse gases. And there is not a single mention of coal on it, not a single mention of oil on it, not a single mention of natural gas on it. It's all about what happens at the end of the pipe. Whereas, as you've pointed out, anything else you try to deal with, in terms of trying to deal with an international issue to do with a resource, you deal with it at both ends, at production end and consumption end. But somehow we got ourselves locked in to dealing with it only at the consumption end, which is the wrong end. It's the least effective end to intervene. Give us some insight into models you've seen elsewhere in human experience which do work, which can show us a way forward.
So I think the first thing is we need to recognize that it's the shape and form of climate change which gives it reality to us. The science is extremely important for underpinning that. I don't in any one way want to say that it's not about the science. But it's about, I don't know, maybe you could say it's about the social facts. Probably more than the scientific facts. So it's how can we make it visible? One aspect of that, I think, is we do have to challenge this pervasive silence. We haven't talked about that much tonight. But the silence that we have on climate change is, I think, comparable to the silence that we've had in other progressive issues. I've mentioned some of them, racism, child abuse, and so on. There is a silence that makes climate change something which is not permissible to talk about. And therefore, what are the models of things which have worked? Well, on all of those things, on all of these campaigns, one of the first starting points was saying, no, damn it, we are going to talk about it. We are going to talk about it. Don't silence us. Because the silence is like where many of you, I'm sure, have had a situation where you talk about climate change with someone and the conversation just dies. Someone changes the subject, it goes somewhere else. Like, no, we're going to talk about this, and this is important in the workplace and every situation we're in. I think another thing which is very important is recognizing that that's, in the end, I think what shifts people is the expression of your personal commitment. And I think that this, again, we're looking for things which cut across political boundaries. I think the fact that you sincerely and utterly accept something that it's important to you is in itself a very much more powerful conveyor of change than hitting someone over the head with the IPCC report. And the lady up there was talking about religion. Yes, I did write a piece on The Guardian for this. I'm extremely interested in the way that religions, without media, incidentally, they generate their own media. Especially evangelical churches build huge followings on the basis of encouraging people to go out and proselytize, of going out people going out and witnessing to the fact that something is important to them and that they believe in it.
She used a very interesting word, epiphany,
which
is not something you often hear in discussions of climate change.
Because we are still locked into this model that somehow, I get this report or this newspaper article and somehow it soaks in through my fingertips through some kind of osmosis. And I go, oh, that's serious. And that is not actually how personal, social, psychological change happens. It happens as we have very little understanding of how it happens with climate change, unfortunately. We need to understand it better. But it's clear if you speak to people, maybe afterwards you might speak with each other, it's clear for many people that there's a jump. But there's a thing where you go, yes, now I get it, now I understand it. It's very personal and very emotional. And we need to both understand that and share that, but we need to make those moments happen. In your own life, and go out there and play around with this. We're trying to find the ways that we can do it. There are definitely ways that we can speak to a combined sense of common purpose, shared identity, the things we have in common, recognizing our differences, moving forward, cooperating, sense of shared threat but shared purpose. Also, I have to say, I'll finish on this point because I can see you're twitching, George. Not to say, oh, there's the juggernaut, we have to stop it, or it will flatten us. But to say, there is something there which threatens what we care about and our values. But if we stand up to this thing, we can build a world which is better in ways that are important, and we can be more the people we think we are. We can be more Christian, we can be more Welsh. We can be better. I'm getting a laugh from that because obviously I'm slightly nervous about the thought of people being more Welsh. But in Wales that goes down well. We can be more than who we are. Because that's the other thing, is that when we talk about this, we have to find ways that the payoff is not stopping something because if we don't, it's going to be bad, but it's already going to be bad. It has to be ways that what comes out of this is something which is positive and constructive for us.
One of the extraordinary paradoxes, someone has already alluded to it, in climate change action is that almost all governments agree that we should be minimizing greenhouse gases. Almost all governments are attempting at the same time to maximize fossil fuel production.